Crossing guard walks bullied child to school every day, not knowing the principal was taking notes. This simple act of kindness, unremarkable to passersby, was changing lives in ways no one could have imagined. But then again, the most profound transformations often begin with the smallest gestures. Martin Reeves had been the crossing guard at Oakwood Elementary for nearly 7 years. At 62, with silver-streaked hair and weather-worn hands, he stood at the same corner each morning, his orange vest a bright beacon against the backdrop of changing seasons. To most, he was merely a fixture of the neighborhood. A friendly wave, a brief good morning, then forgotten until the next day's commute. But to 10-year-old Elijah Foster, Martin had become something else entirely. It began on a Tuesday in late September, when autumn was just beginning to paint the trees in shades of amber and gold. The morning air carried a sharp chill that made Martin's arthritic knuckles ache as he held up his stop sign. Children streamed past him in groups of 2s and 3s, their backpacks bouncing, their laughter creating puffs of vapor in the cool air. That's when Martin noticed him. A small boy walking alone, head down, shoulders hunched beneath a too large navy blue coat. Something about the child's posture spoke of a heaviness that no 10-year-old should carry. As the boy approached the crosswalk, Martin saw the scuff marks on his sneakers, the frayed edge of his backpack strap, and most concerning, the fading bruise near his eye. "Morning, young man," Martin said, his voice gentle but cheerful. The boy glanced up briefly, his eyes dark pools of wariness, before looking down again. "Morning," he mumbled, barely audible above the morning traffic. Martin watched as the child crossed the street, noting how he veered wide around a group of older boys waiting on the other side. One of them stuck out a foot as the small boy passed, not quite tripping him, but making him stumble. Snickers followed, sharp as knives in the crisp morning air. Martin's hand tightened around his stop sign. The next morning, he was watching for the boy. Same navy coat, same hunched shoulders. This time, Martin stepped away from his post when the child approached. "Mind if I walk with you to the school entrance today?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "Got to stretch these old legs a bit." The boy, Elijah, Martin would later learn, looked up with surprise, confusion creasing his forehead. After a moment's hesitation, he gave a small nod. They crossed in silence, Martin positioning himself between Elijah and the group of boys who'd been waiting in the same spot. The older children kept their distance, their usual taunts swallowed under Martin's watchful gaze. It wasn't until they reached the school entrance that Elijah spoke. "Thank you," he said, the words so soft they nearly disappeared into the morning bustle. Martin simply nodded. "See you tomorrow, young man." And so it began, a ritual neither had planned but both came to rely on. Each morning, Martin would step away from his crosswalk to accompany Elijah to the school doors. At first, their walks were silent, filled only with the sound of their footsteps and the distant chatter of other children. But silence has a way of growing comfortable when shared with the right person. By the third week, Elijah had begun to talk. "I like your pin," he said one morning, pointing to the small silver eagle Martin wore on his jacket. Martin's hand rose to touch it, a reflex born of decades. "Air Force," he explained. "Served 22 years. Elijah's eyes widened. "Did you fly planes?" "Mechanics division. Fixed them, didn't fly them." Martin smiled. "But I got to sit in the cockpit a few times. Felt like sitting inside a thunderstorm." That small exchange opened a door. Each day brought new questions from Elijah, each answer from Martin building a bridge between them. What neither noticed was the principal's office window, which overlooked the walkway to the school entrance. Behind that window, Principal Diana Chen observed their daily ritual with growing interest. She had been concerned about Elijah since the school year began. His falling grades, his isolation, the accidents that seemed to happen around him. His mother, raising him alone since his father's death 2 years ago, worked double shifts at the hospital and could rarely attend school meetings. Diana made notes in a small leather-bound journal, documenting what she saw, how Elijah's posture changed in Martin's presence, how his steps grew lighter as they approached the school, how, occasionally, a smile would briefly illuminate his face. October gave way to November, bringing shorter days and longer shadows. The morning walks continued, evolving into something both Martin and Elijah came to cherish. "They took my lunch yesterday," Elijah confided one particularly cold morning, his breath forming clouds between them. "Third time this month." Martin felt that familiar tightening in his chest, a mixture of anger and helplessness. "Have you told your teachers?" Elijah kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk. "They just make it worse when adults get involved." Martin understood. He'd seen enough of life to know that authority didn't always equal protection. "Well," he said carefully, Sometimes the trick is finding ways to be strong without fighting. The boy looked up, skeptical. Like what? Martin considered this. When I was in the service, I knew a man half my size who never got bothered. Know why? He waited until Elijah shook his head. Because he walked like he belonged everywhere he went. Head up, eyes forward, like he had important places to be. That's it? Elijah asked, disbelief evident in his voice. That, and he could name every star in the sky. Martin chuckled. People respect what impresses them. Could be strength, could be smarts, could be kindness. They had reached the school entrance. Martin placed a gentle hand on Elijah's shoulder. Find what makes you shine, young man. That afternoon in the school library, Elijah checked out a book on astronomy. From her office window, Principal Chen watched Martin and Elijah's morning conversation, noting the way the crossing guard's hand rested briefly on the boy's shoulder, and how Elijah seemed to stand taller afterward. She added another entry to her journal, then picked up the phone to make a call. The weeks passed, each day adding another thread to the unlikely friendship forming between the aging crossing guard and the bullied fourth grader. Martin began bringing 2 thermoses of hot chocolate on particularly cold mornings. Elijah started wearing a blue knit hat that matched Martin's. December arrived with the first snow, transforming their route into a glittering white path. Elijah arrived at the crosswalk with red-rimmed eyes one morning. What's troubling you, young man? Martin asked, immediately concerned. Elijah wiped his nose with his sleeve. Today's the day, he said, voice thick. 2 years since Dad died. Martin felt the words like a physical weight. He'd suspected something like this lay beneath Elijah's sadness, but hearing it confirmed made his heart ache. I'm sorry, he said, the words feeling woefully inadequate. They walked in silence for several moments, the snow crunching beneath their feet. I was in the hospital too, Martin finally said, when my wife passed. Cancer. 15 years ago now. He hadn't meant to share this. It wasn't something he spoke about often, but something told him Elijah needed to hear it. The boy looked up at him. Does it ever stop hurting? Martin considered this carefully. Not stop, he admitted, but it changes. Becomes something you can carry without it crushing you. Elijah nodded slowly as if absorbing this truth. Mom says she still talks to him sometimes. Smart woman, your mother, Martin said with a gentle smile. I still talk to my Eleanor too. When they reached the school entrance, Elijah hesitated. I don't want to go in today, he confessed. Martin crouched down, ignoring the protest of his knees to meet Elijah at eye level. Tell you what, after school I'll be right here. And if you want, we can walk to that bakery on Elm Street. I hear they make cinnamon rolls big as your head. For the first time in days, Elijah smiled. Really? Cross my heart, Martin said, making the gesture. From her office window, Principal Chen observed the exchange, noting the way Martin knelt despite obvious discomfort and how Elijah's body language transformed. She made another entry in her journal, then checked her calendar, circling a date in January. True to his word, Martin waited at the school entrance that afternoon. Together, they walked to Sweet's Bakery, where Martin ordered 2 enormous cinnamon rolls and listened as Elijah shared memories of his father, how he taught Elijah to ride a bike, how he made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, how he knew all the words to every Beatles song. He sounds like a fine man, Martin said, watching Elijah lick frosting from his fingers. He was. Elijah paused, studying Martin with unexpected intensity. He would have liked you. The words caught Martin off guard, a warm ache spreading through his chest. I would have liked him too, he managed to say. That evening, as snow began to fall again, Martin sat in his small apartment, looking at old photographs of Eleanor. Met someone today you would have adored, he told her image. Smart kid. Been through too much already. He touched the edge of the frame. Reminds me a bit of our Michael at that age. Across town, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, Elijah sat at the kitchen table with his mother, Emma, as she prepared dinner after her shift. Martin said the stars were all different in Afghanistan. Elijah explained, flipping through his astronomy book. He said they felt closer there, like you could reach up and grab them. Emma paused in chopping vegetables, a small smile forming. You talk about Martin a lot these days. Elijah shrugged, but there was no hiding the way his face brightened at the name. He knows lots of stuff, and he doesn't treat me like a baby. Emma studied her son, noting the animation in his face that had been missing for so long. Maybe we should invite him for dinner sometime, she suggested carefully. Elijah's eyes widened. Can we? Really? Emma nodded, her heart lightening at his enthusiasm. Really? The following week brought a heavy snowstorm that closed schools for 2 days. When classes resumed, Elijah raced to the crosswalk, eager to tell Martin about the snow fort he'd built and to extend the dinner invitation. But Martin wasn't there. Instead, a younger woman in an orange vest directed traffic at the intersection. Elijah felt his stomach drop. "Where's Mr. Martin?" he asked, trying to keep the panic from his voice. The substitute crossing guard looked down at him. "Mr. Reeves? Called in sick yesterday and today. Flu's going around." Elijah walked to school alone that day, and the next, and the one after that. The group of older boys, noting Martin's absence, resumed their taunts. One of them shoved Elijah hard enough to send him sprawling onto the slushy sidewalk, his astronomy book landing in a puddle. By the fourth day without Martin, Elijah could barely concentrate in class. When the final bell rang, instead of heading home, he went to the school office. "I need Mr. Martin's address," he announced to Mrs. Patel, the school secretary. "It's important." Mrs. Patel looked up from her computer. "I'm sorry, Elijah, but we can't give out personal information about school staff." "But he's not really staff," Elijah argued, "and he might be really sick." Or he couldn't bring himself to voice his deepest fear. Before Mrs. Patel could respond, Principal Chen's door opened. "Elijah, would you come into my office for a moment?" Heart pounding, Elijah followed her inside. Was he in trouble for asking about Martin? Principal Chen gestured to a chair. "I couldn't help overhearing. You're concerned about Mr. Reeves." Elijah nodded, clutching his backpack straps. "He's been gone 4 days." "Yes, he has." Principal Chen sat down across from him. "Elijah, I want to show you something." She opened the leather-bound journal on her desk, turning it so he could see. Each page contained dated entries, many mentioning his name alongside Martin's. "I've been watching you and Mr. Reeves these past few months," she explained. "I've seen how much he's helped you." Elijah stared at the journal, not understanding. "Is he okay?" Principal Chen's expression softened. "He's in the hospital, Elijah. Not the flu, his heart. He had what's called an episode." The room seemed to tilt. Elijah felt his own heart hammering against his ribs. Is he going to? "The doctors are taking good care of him," Principal Chen assured him quickly. "But he'll need to rest for quite a while." Elijah swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Can I see him?" "That's actually why I called you in." She reached for her phone. "I've already spoken with your mother. She's on her way to pick you up now. If it's all right with you, I thought we might visit Mr. Reeves together." 40 minutes later, Elijah stood in the doorway of a hospital room, his mother's hand on his shoulder, Principal Chen beside them. Martin looked smaller somehow, lying in the hospital bed, an IV line in his arm and monitors beeping softly beside him. When he saw Elijah, Martin's tired face broke into a smile that transformed him. "Well, look who's here," he said, his voice weaker but still unmistakably his. Elijah rushed forward, stopping just short of the bed, suddenly uncertain. "It's okay," Martin assured him, patting the edge of the mattress. "This old ticker just needed a tune-up, that's all." Elijah perched carefully on the bed. "You didn't say goodbye," he accused, his voice thick. Martin's eyes grew serious. "No, I didn't. And I'm sorry for that. Didn't exactly plan this pit stop." From the doorway, Emma watched her son with the man who had come to mean so much to him. She stepped forward, extending her hand. "Mr. Reeves, I'm Emma Foster, Elijah's mom. I've heard so much about you." Martin took her hand. "All good, I hope." "Every word," she confirmed with a warm smile. "Though he failed to mention you were so young." Martin chuckled, then winced slightly. "Flattery will get you everywhere, Mrs. Foster." "Emma, please." Principal Chen joined them, introducing herself formally to Martin. "Mr. Reeves, I want to thank you for what you've done for Elijah. We've seen remarkable changes in him these past few months." Martin looked uncomfortable with the praise. Just walking the boy to school. Anyone would have done the same. "But they didn't," Emma said quietly. "You did." The conversation flowed easily after that, with Elijah showing Martin his astronomy book, dried out but still readable, and recounting the constellations he'd learned. Eventually, a nurse came in to check Martin's vitals, suggesting that perhaps it was time to let the patient rest. As they prepared to leave, Elijah lingered by the bed. "When will you come back to the crosswalk?" Martin exchanged a glance with Emma before answering. "Might be a while, young man. Doctor says I need to take it easy for a few weeks, maybe longer." Elijah's face fell. "But what about our walks?" "Tell you what," Martin said, reaching for Elijah's hand. "You keep learning those stars, and when I'm better, we'll have plenty to talk about." It wasn't until they were in the hallway that Elijah finally let the tears come, pressing his face against his mother's side. Emma knelt before him. "He's going to be okay, honey. But what if the boys start again? What if—" "I think," Principal Chen interrupted gently, "that's something we can address together, Elijah. In fact, I have an idea that might help both you and Mr. Reeves." January brought bitter cold and a slow return to routine. Elijah went back to walking to school alone. though Principal Chen had ensured the bullies received consequences for their actions, and a teacher now monitored the crosswalk area each morning. But Elijah missed the daily walks with Martin. The stories, the easy companionship, the feeling of safety that came from having someone who understood without needing everything explained. Each day after school, Emma would drive Elijah to visit Martin, who had been discharged from the hospital but was still recovering at home. Martin's small apartment became familiar to them. The bookshelves lined with history volumes and flight manuals, the framed Air Force commendations, the photographs of a smiling woman Elijah now knew was Eleanor. One evening in late January, as they were preparing to leave after their visit, Principal Chen called Emma. "Is Elijah with you?" she asked. "I was hoping to speak with both of you, and Mr. Reeves if possible." Emma put the call on speaker. "We're actually at Martin's apartment now. Is everything okay?" "Better than okay, I hope," Principal Chen replied. "Remember that idea I mentioned? Well, the school board approved it today. We're creating a new position, school safety mentor. Part-time, flexible hours, focused on building relationships with students who need additional support." Martin, listening from his armchair, raised an eyebrow. The job would involve being present during morning arrival, lunch periods, and afternoon dismissal. Principal Chen continued, providing a positive adult presence, identifying students who might need help, that sort of thing. "And you're telling us because?" Emma prompted, though her smile suggested she already understood. "Because I'd like to offer the position to Mr. Reeves," Principal Chen said. "Once his doctor clears him for light duty, of course." Martin sat up straighter. "Me? But I'm not a teacher. I'm just a man who changed my son's life by simply walking with him." Emma finished for him. Principal Chen's voice grew earnest. "Mr. Reeves, what you did for Elijah is exactly what many of our students need. Not necessarily academic help, but someone who sees them, who makes them feel safe and valued." Elijah, who had been listening silently, suddenly spoke up. "You could help other kids like me." His eyes were bright with excitement, and we could still see each other every day. Martin looked from Elijah to Emma, his expression a mixture of surprise and something deeper. "I'd need to think about it," he said slowly. But in his heart, he already knew his answer. February brought Martin back to Oakwood Elementary, not in his orange vest at the crosswalk, but with a new ID badge identifying him as school safety mentor. His first official duty was to establish a morning welcome routine at the main entrance, greeting students, keeping an eye out for any concerns, and being available to those who needed a friendly face to start their day. Elijah still met him at the crosswalk each morning, now walking proudly beside the man who had changed his world. Together they would enter the school, Martin to his new post and Elijah to a classroom where, increasingly, he found his voice and his place. The bullying didn't disappear overnight. Such problems rarely do, but it diminished significantly. Partly because of Martin's vigilant presence, partly because of Principal Chen's no-tolerance policy, but mostly because Elijah himself had changed. He walked differently now, head up, eyes forward, like someone who had important places to be. And he knew the names of 27 constellations. By spring, Martin had become a beloved figure at Oakwood. Children sought him out to share triumphs and troubles alike. Teachers appreciated his calm presence during chaotic lunch periods. Parents noticed how their children mentioned Mr. Martin with affection and respect. But none of this surprised Principal Chen, who continued to make entries in her leather-bound journal. Not just about Elijah and Martin now, but about all the small transformations she witnessed daily. The shy kindergartner who now gave Martin high fives each morning. The fourth-grade girl who brought him drawings every Friday. The group of former bullies who now helped him monitor the lunch line. On a warm day in late April, as cherry blossoms dusted the sidewalks with pale pink, Principal Chen called Martin and Elijah to her office. "I'd like to show you both something," she said, opening her desk drawer. She pulled out a large envelope and handed it to Martin. "The school board was quite impressed with how our safety mentor program has been working." Martin opened the envelope, Elijah peering over his arm. Inside was a formal letter announcing the expansion of the program to all schools in the district for the coming year, citing Oakwood's success as the model. "They're naming it after you," Principal Chen said softly. "The Martin Reeves School Safety Initiative." Martin stared at the letter, his weathered hands trembling slightly. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help train the new mentors," Principal Chen suggested. "Many of them will be retirees like yourself, looking for meaningful ways to give back." Elijah tugged at Martin's sleeve. "See? I told you that you were important." Martin placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, the gesture now as natural as breathing. "We both are, young man. We both are. That evening, Martin joined Emma and Elijah for dinner, a weekly tradition now. As they ate, Emma shared news about her promotion at the hospital. Elijah recounted his latest science project, and Martin told stories that made them both laugh until their sides ached. Later, as the sun began to set, Martin and Elijah stood in the backyard, gazing up at the darkening sky. There, Elijah pointed. That's Orion. And over there, that's Cassiopeia. Martin nodded approvingly. You've got a good eye. Dad and I used to look at stars sometimes. Elijah said after a moment. Not like this, though. We didn't know their names. I bet he'd be proud of how much you've learned. Elijah was quiet for a beat. Mom says he sends people to watch over us. Like guardian angels, but real people. He glanced at Martin. I think maybe he sent you. Martin felt his throat tighten with emotion. If he did, he managed to say, then I'm grateful. Above them, the first stars of evening pierced the twilight, ancient light traveling across unimaginable distances to reach them. Just as a simple act of kindness, a crossing guard walking a bullied child to school had traversed its own vast emotional distance, connecting two souls in need of each other. Neither could have predicted this outcome on that autumn morning when Martin first noticed a small boy walking alone, head down, shoulders hunched beneath a too large navy blue coat. Neither knew that a principal was taking notes, documenting what would become a story of transformation. But then again, the most profound journeys often begin with a single step across an ordinary street, guided by an extraordinary heart. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, someone is there to help us make that crossing.